The July 16th, 2014 meeting of the school committee will come to order. And as is our tradition, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approve tonight's agenda. We have just a couple of changes. On item 4E under the superintendent's report, the proposed salary for the interim appointment for assistant superintendent for curriculum needs to be discussed, I think, as part of our negotiation strategy for non-union personnel, so I'm going to move that to executive session. On item 7B, because we have Dr. Karen Spaulding here to talk about internal assessments, we're actually going to move that up under the superintendent's report so that she can do that closer to her other presentation. And those are the only two changes I have. Any other changes? Ms. Keller?
Is this a first and second reading of the policy?
If I may, I think technically we'll propose it to be a second reading and waiving the first reading based on an emergency condition. I think that's the technical view on the policy.
We just might want the wording of the agenda item to reflect that.
Okay.
Great. Done. Anything else? Okay, citizens speak. Anyone for citizen speak? There is none, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. It's my pleasure to invite to join the school committee at the table Dr. Karen Spaulding and a very special Pierce Middle School student, Eliza O'Donnell. Will you join us at the table? Welcome, Eliza. Dr. Spaulding, I'll leave the introductions and this wonderful news story to you.
Pass one down to Mary.
Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be here with Eliza, who entered a contest under the leadership of Miss Sherman. I was just telling Eliza, I'm not sure if Eliza's more excited or Miss Sherman, but this is the first annual national contest run out of Ringling College down in Florida, and Ringling is known for its programming in graphics design and art and communication through art and storytelling. And so Eliza, there are a couple of copies of it around. Eliza entered and for grades 7 through 9 photography category was the grand prize winner in the nation. So we are very excited for her. Her work is featured, if you go to the Ringling College website, her work is featured there. But we are just thrilled. She has won a trip. Can I share? Is that okay? Okay. She has won a trip and will be accompanied by her art teacher down to Florida soon. Next week?
Yeah, next week.
Next week to Universal Studios, where they are holding special art workshops. There are a couple of other categories, so they're bringing all of the grand prize winners together, and so she will get to meet those folks and engage in these workshops. And so we are so excited and proud of her. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe if Eliza could hold up the piece of artwork, the Milton cable might be able to zoom in on it. So exciting.
Mr. Zulus?
Eliza, I'm curious, did the photo spawn the poem, or did the poem spawn the photo?
I think that the poem probably was before the picture.
Okay.
Do you want to share the poem with the school committee and the viewing audience? It's wonderful to read it, but it would be amazing for everyone watching. Oh, you don't even have to think anybody's watching, just us. Would you share the poem? I'm very, very proud of you.
Sure. I speak English. They speak Portuguese. I still celebrate Christmas. They celebrate the Chinese New Year. I eat a burger. They eat rice. I drink soda. They have a cup of tea. I wear sneakers. They go barefoot. But we can always find one thing in common. We all know the feeling of the perfect touch, the perfect pass, and the perfect shot. The joy of a victory and the bitterness of a loss. All around the world, children play soccer. Even though we are set apart, we are brought together on the soccer field, playing soccer under the same sun.
So, Eliza, I'm curious, what kind of camera did you use?
I think it was just my mom's camera. I don't really know what kind it was. It wasn't anything fancy.
Nice job.
And so this will be in, and it's in the email blast, in a gallery of all of the artwork. That is really exciting.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, we're very proud of you. And if Ms. Sherman had been able to come tonight with us, it's Ms. Sherman, right? She would have, but as Dr. Spalding said, I don't know which of you is more excited. So we're really proud that you're going to Florida and represent you, your talent, Pierce Middle School, and the Milton Public Schools. Congratulations.
Ms. Padera?
I just wanted to say ask one thing first of all. So were you inspired by your mother because she's such a great soccer player? Was that the number one reason? Or is it just your love of soccer?
I think that's my parents who have encouraged
Did
my
your
love
dad
of
too, yeah.
soccer and stuff.
And you get to go to Universal Studios, and I understand it's all about the art and everything, but are there any rides that you're looking forward to going
Yeah,
on?
I think we get a VIP tour of Universal Studios.
Oh,
or
yeah. Behind the scenes kind of thing?
something like that, yeah.
So I highly recommend the Harry Potter ride and the Spider-Man ride. Those are my two favorites. Are your parents going to get to go as well?
No, we have a different trip planned.
Nice. All right. Well, I think you can tell you have a love of soccer, which inspired your art, and that's just such a wonderful thing to see. See, sports and art can go together.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Eliza. Next, I'd like to ask to join us at the school committee table, Milton High School Principal James Jett, PS Middle School Principal Dr. Karen Spalding, and Tucker Elementary School Principal Dr. Elaine McNeil-Germain. And as form of introduction to this presentation, through the advancement initiatives in the Milton Public School, the implementation of internal assessments at each grade, some of the assessments purchased, others teacher-created. Wait till everyone's in place. Mary, yes, John. So again, as way of introducing this presentation, through the advancement budget, the purchase of internal assessments, and in our initiatives of closing the achievement gap and literacy, all students reading at grade level at the end of grade 3, K through 12, we've implemented internal assessments. As I said, some purchased, others teacher-created, and this school committee has shown great interest in the implementation of these internal assessments. I appreciate James, Karen, and Elaine coming in the middle of the summer, representing their peers and all of the department heads and the teachers, the amount of work that went into identifying these internal assessments, learning how to administer them, discuss them, use them as a basis of further instruction, has really driven the Milton Public Schools this year. So I think the school committee and the viewing audience will find this a very exciting presentation. So thank you for coming, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Before we get into the data, we just wanted to set the context a little bit in terms of the work that we've been doing, because what you'll see tonight is, as they say, the tip of the iceberg of what eventually will become our full assessment system. Actually all of the assessments that you'll hear about tonight are in their infancy in terms of being used, whether they are commercially produced or whether we produce them internally. And so we wanted to give you sort of a snapshot of some of the preliminary data that we have for these assessments, as well as communicate what our next steps are. We have been engaging in conversation at the school level, at the district level, as well as at the state level, really determining how do you develop rigorous, reliable, valid, common assessments, internal assessments, and in addition to that, how do you then shift from giving the assessment to giving a series of assessments where you're really capturing student growth, because that's what we're all about here, is helping students to grow in their learning and understanding of the material that we teach. So we will begin by just going over some of the data that we have at each of the levels, and then at each of the levels describe what some of the next steps are. And you may hear some reoccurring themes at each of the levels, because again, we are across the district in K-12 having conversations about best practice in the area of assessment.
Okay, so I'm going to start off by going over the early literacy data for the elementary schools. So the data was captured utilizing the Founders and Pinnell reading assessment and the G&B assessment for the French immersion students, which is its correlated French assessment piece. Essentially what it measures is it's looking at fluency and comprehension. So for students to be considered at proficiency, they need to meet a benchmark in both of those. So for this year, we utilize the benchmark that's given through the Fountains and Pinnell assessment system for the different grade level bands. And I know you have the data right up there. So you can see that it varies by school, but really we're all in the 80s to 90 percentage points in terms of proficiency. And I actually think what's even more important and impressive is if we really look at the students that are below benchmark, all of them are under 10. And when we think about the support in the schools, that's a really good number to be able to tackle the needs of those students and work with them in small groups and providing support from our reading specialist. So there's work to be done, but we have quite a few students that are at benchmark or above. And, I think that's really a testament to all of the work the reading specialists and coordinators did this year around the reading assessment and the importance of it and early literacy skills. So this is the English, and then with the French immersion. Again, you can see some similar trends here. We have a slight dip in our first grade French in Tucker. But again, if you look at the number of students below benchmark, it's very similar. We have less students, so I think that those one or two students, they tend to have a bigger impact on the data. And same with the grade 2, we're all in the 80 to 90% range. For the math year-end assessment, this is done utilizing an internal math assessment that's been created. So throughout the year, we use the unit assessments that go with the everyday math program, but we do district determined assessments, pre-test, a mid-year test, and the end of the year. And again, we're looking at pretty strong percentage points, and again, only a few students that we're really concerned about in those lower levels. So we have some next steps around the data, but here's where we are. This is our older students, the mathematics, grades 3 to 5. So again, not big jumps there.
So for the Pierce, in grades 6th and 7th grade, all students are given the Scholastic Reading Inventory, and what that does is produces what we call a Lexile score, and then there are bands of expected Lexile scores per grade level. And so students can then be put into these buckets that you see up here of basic, proficient, and advanced. And so we gave this assessment to 6th graders and 7th graders both in the fall and in the spring. And so what we see in that data is that students from the beginning of the year to the end of the year have shifted some out of the basic into the proficient, some out of the proficient into the advanced. And then for students in the beginning of the year who produce Lexile scores that are notably below grade level, they are followed up with the Fountas and Pinnell, and what that does is reveals sort of a deeper understanding of what the reading challenge might be. Is it a reading comprehension challenge? Is it a fluency? Is it a decoding? What might be going on with that particular student? That's a one-on-one assessment that's given, which is why we don't give it to all 310 students, but we're able to target them given that SRI data and follow up with the F&P. And so that allowed us to create our targeted reading groups that our reading specialist worked with. And what we see, what you have at the bottom there, is what their growth looked like in terms of levels on the Fountas and Pinnell over the course of the year. And we have a notable number of students who demonstrated growth that was beyond what would be expected in a year, sort of average growth in a year. And so the takeaway from that is that targeted reading support absolutely works. And so we're very excited that the district has supported that through the advancement budget and all of those things at the elementary level as well as moving up. And then for mathematics and science. So what you see, these interim assessments that we have this year were developed this year. So I just put that out there as a word of caution in terms of thinking about the data. You know, you want to have a few go-arounds in terms of trying out an internally made assessment before you can feel totally confident in the data. When you first glance at those numbers, it appears that there was no growth from the implementation of one interim assessment to the next. However, it should be noted that second interim, an interim, by the way, is a cumulative assessment. We also have unit assessments, many of them, anywhere from 10 to 11 unit assessments in the course of a year. But we wanted something that would demonstrate that not just that I remember the topic I was taught in October, but I remember the topic I was taught in October, in March and April and May and June and that kind of thing. So we created these interim assessments. And that second one is a more rigorous, higher level assessment. And so to score a number similar on both of them, we can assume some growth. Our work ahead is to figure out how to actually name that growth and what does it really look like. But that's some work that we have moving forward. And then for the science, much as you know, thanks to the advancement budget, we have been implementing curriculum materials and reflecting on them and making sure they're aligned with learning standards that are called for in the state frameworks. And we've also been trying out assessments and developing assessments. And so again, this data is we have to be cautious about the data, and it's very preliminary, but these are scores on some of the trimester cumulative assessments. The tricky part in terms of the science is that we teach an integrated science course, and so we have been in development, which I'll talk more about when we get to the next step slide, but we've been having conversations and developing assessments where we can measure growth over time in science. We've been doing it in all of the subject areas. It poses a particular challenge in science because we teach different science disciplines throughout the year. So that's some of the work that we've been doing in our next steps.
At Milton High School, our primary assessments, common assessments, are midterm exams and our final exams, although every single content area does have common unit assessments, but again, we're using the midterms, the mid-year, and the final exams. I do want to preface my comments by saying that this is the first time that I'm sharing this information, whereas our biology teachers, math teachers, chemistry teachers have yet to have that dialogue about the end results of the final exams. They will do that in August when they come back. And some have already been in, but I'm saying as an entire group. If you look at the scores for biology, which is a required course, a tested course under the MCAS for the freshman year, for the midterms, we had 201 students who took the exam. Unfortunately, we had 41 students at the midterm point who didn't make the mark of 60% or better. I share this piece as a concern, but I also I want to preface it by saying it is something that we have been mindful of, we're very cognizant of, and we will continue to work at making sure everyone makes that mark. I will say MCAS is a benchmark exam. We want to believe that our midterm and our final exam in biology is a little bit higher than the MCAS, and we give our MCAS final in the month of May. And that was strategically done for the first time last year to try to serve as a safety net to identify areas of weakness that the kids were having in biology, so that way we could backload or backfill that between the time of the final exam in the MCAS. We did that again this year. Unfortunately, those MCAS scores are not out until mid-August to schools for principals and curriculum coordinators, and not until September for the general public. So unfortunately, we had 17 students who did not make the passing mark, but we had 83% who did in the midterm. As for the final exam, you may see a difference in the number of exams taken. That could be in part due to kids moving into the district mid-year after the final exam, which we have a number of students who have done so. In the number of students who passed, we're 84%. So again, we have our work cut out for us in the freshman year for biology. It's the first year that they take a full year of a science course. At the middle school, they have the integrated science curriculum where they take physical science, earth science, and life science each year. And so this is the first year that also the freshmen are taking these midterm exams and final exams. So we hope that we'll see continued improvement in that area. For
Mr. Jet, may I ask you a question? Am I reading the wrong percentage? You just shared the biology
Yeah.
at percentage of students.
Yeah, why is mine a little off? I will go by the one that we have up here. Excuse me.
We'll check that.
We will double check that, absolutely. I'm sorry, I was looking at math data. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So we have 214 students who passed the exam, 79%. Again, as I stated to you, we're looking to try to improve that, and I apologize for that error. In chemistry, we had 195 students who took the midterm exam. 85% of those students passed. Unfortunately, we still have a percentage of students who did not make the mark of 60% or better. Chemistry, again, we are working on, and you'll see it in our next steps, trying to align our curriculum with the pre-AP. And then we also have the new generation science skills and curriculum is coming out. Science has been a moving target for many years. It's still in draft form, and we hope that eventually we could really solidify and shore that up and really start backfilling some of the areas that we have gaps in. And for physics, that's for students who are in higher level grades. You see midterms, 153 took the exam. 95% of the students passed for the midterm. And for the finals, there are a lot less students that take it. And you have to, what we have at the high schools, we have senior exemptions. Kids who take APs, they're exempt from taking final exams. So you see a huge disparity between the number of students who take the midterm versus the number of students who take the final exam. Another contributing factor, and I've already spoken to Mary Gormley about this, we ran into a situation at the end of the year this year with the 5 snow days, which tacked on a full week of additional week of school. We had a number of students whose families have already made prearranged vacations who weren't here to take the final exam. So that's a challenge for us as well. And sometimes students are medically excused for a variety of reasons, ranging from concussions or some other sort of illness. So that's why you may see a disparity between the number of test takers at any given time. For the next slide, here's where we were talking about the 83% of the students have passed for the midterm in course 1. Now, course 1, course 2, all students pretty much go through this. That's your Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 combination. We're moving towards an integrated math curriculum. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we came before the school committee to change it. This year, we said all incoming freshmen will take course 1. Last year, we tried to do that, but we still had a number of students who were in our lower level math classes that we still didn't want to make the huge jump, so we had to do that transition. That's why you see a lower number of students, test takers in course 2. My hope and our expectation in the next couple of years would be phasing that out, and all students would take the course 1 and course 2. If you notice up here for the midterm, 201 for course 2, 64 took it. 71% of those students passed. For the final exam, again, it decreased. 58 students took it. Out of the 58, 64 students, 64% passed. And we had a challenge with that course 2, getting a significant number of the students over that hurdle. I'm not sure exactly how far we have to go. Again, that's another layer of the data that we have to go through. I'm not sure who those students are right now at this point. That's another layer of data that we have to go through. But our goal is to go through it piece by piece, student by student, to make sure that we make those improvements. For course 3, we had 172 students take it for the midterm, and we had 75% of the students pass. Slightly difference in terms of numbers, the increase to the final exam. Again, that could be contributed to students moving into the district. 77% of the students passed, and we had 23% of the students who did not. I have already had some conversation with Courtney Walsh, who is the math department head. She, being part of the administrator for the calculus project, she's around in the summer, so she's already peeling back those different layers in hopes to have that conversation with the teachers as they come in. For our pre-calculus, and this is where you start to see a divide at the high school level, where students in the math program, as they get higher into the grades, they have more options, whether it's pre-calculus or statistics. Here you have the pre-calculus. We had 129 students take the midterm exam. 91% of those students passed, where a small number of percentage, 12, did not make the mark. Same thing with the final exam. Slightly decrease in the number of test takers, slight decrease, but 96% of those students passed. Now that decrease, that could be, students either moving out or students being exempt from taking that exam. And then the AQR, that is a combination of statistics and pre-calc. That's where kids could are recommended for their class because they're not sure what path that they want to take. They get a little bit of both. Again, not as many students take that, but some of those are seniors. 72 test takers took the midterm. 5 did not make the mark, and 94% of them, those students passed. Again, most of them were exempt from final exams. They're your older students, so they did not have to take that final exam. So that's data that we don't have as a follow-up. And finally, you have your statistics. Very similar situation. The midterm, 72 students passed, 5 did not. 94% of the students passed the exam for math. One of the challenges that we have is we're going to be phasing out some of the students. So again, next year, all of our rising 9th graders this coming year will be taking course 1. We're trying to align it to the PARCC exam, trying to make sure that we have everything up to par so we're meeting with success on these national exams. For English, this is a very difficult subject because a lot of the examinations have to do with writing, essays, short answers, so it's hard to really get common answers as you would do in math, where there's a single response or a single right answer in some cases. A lot of this is, writing and interpreting, students writing and giving them grades. But in course 1, again, pretty much your freshmen, 200 students took the exam. 87% of our students passed that exam at the midterm. The final exam, more students took it, and more of a percentage passed the exam in that course 1. So we see a little bit of growth there. We do have, roughly about the same amount of students taking the test, and Barbara Wright has been working very closely with the teachers to try to make that improvement. One of the things that I find interesting, and I haven't had the conversation with the teachers yet, if you look at the sophomores, that's an MCAS year for English. And if you notice in the English 216 test takers, 97% of the students passed that exam for the midterm, and 94 passed it for the final. That's almost on par with our MCAS scores, and we're trying to see what the correlation is for that year. That's just a conversation or a discussion I had earlier, or I should say yesterday as we were looking at the data. But we still want to focus on those students in the bracket who did not make the passing mark. I will go back to course 1. When freshmen come in, we also have co-taught, and every single one of those students take it. Students on IEPs, students on 504s, we make sure that they have the accommodations that they need. And so we think the students are making significant progress. It is a change in the expectations a little bit, but we definitely want to make sure every single one of the students are making that mark. In grade 11, English 3, there's a combination of American experience and AP English language. We had 186 test takers. 85% of those students passed the mark. Again, we have to focus on that small percentage. Again, we celebrate our success, but we want to make sure that we focus on the number of students who did not make that mark of 60 or better. And then for the final exam, we have a few less test takers. Again, that goes back to the exemption status and or students moving out of the district for whatever reason. And then finally, grade 12, English 4 and AP English. Again, midterm, 204 students took it. A very small number did not make the mark. 94% of the students passed the exam. So we have our challenge at the high school level, trying to find these common assessments that we could use periodically throughout the year, not necessarily waiting solely for the final exam, because again, where we're given exemptions, when that's data that we're not able to collect. They could definitely give us some information about that. The other piece is we're also trying to align ourselves with the new generation science skills and curriculum, the PARC, and we're also trying to align ourselves with the pre-AP, making sure that we set a high bar of expectations for all of our students. So that I kind of talked a little bit about that on the next steps, implementing mathematics performance. We're talking about open response, short answers. How can we measure growth from one point to the next point? Those are our challenges, but we're up for the par, and like I said, some people are already on it. This is elementary, so.
All right, so in terms of our elementary next steps, and I think, as Karen mentioned, there's going to be a lot of similar themes. It's really around growth and correlation for next year. So we want to develop growth bands to measure student growth on the Fountas and Pinnell assessment for students in grades 1 and 2 and the Scholastic Reading Inventory for grades 3 to 5. And essentially what we're looking at there is, as I mentioned, we're looking at the proficiency of the students, but we're not necessarily looking at the growth that they've made throughout the year. And, you know, that's going to be a big indicator for us about the progress they're making. The proficiencies don't really tell the whole story. And I think about one student we had that came in first grade this year, didn't go to kindergarten, and grew to the point where she met proficiency at the end of first grade, but she grew 2 years in 1 year. And that's not in this data. It just shows her as one student that met proficiency. And there's a lot of other stories like that. So we really want to kind of dig in and develop for ourselves as a district what are the growth bands that we're looking for so that we can really determine that number and start to break down the data a little bit more. And the same with the Scholastic Reading Inventory. We also want to correlate the 3 to 5 Scholastic Reading Inventory data with the final 2015 PARC data. So we're still really determining if the SRI is going to be a good indicator for us of how students will be doing on the PARC. Was it a good indicator on the MCAS exam? And so that's something we need to continue to look at. As Karen mentioned, we do the SRI in grades 3 to 5, and if students have met the Lexile that we expect, then we're not digging deeper to give them the Fountas and Pinnell assessment. And for some students, it is a different test, and so some students may do very well on that, but again, it doesn't tell the whole story. So if we have a good understanding of how it correlates, then we can maybe decide which students also need the fountain Pinnell, or what number or what questions will help us identify where we need to support students more in advance. Implementing math performance tests to collect growth data for 2014 and 2015. So our math end of the year assessments now, again, they're problems on the page, and we really want to have students do performance tasks where we can see growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So many of our assessments have skills at the start of the year that are very different than the end of the year, and it's hard to tease out, how much they've really grown in those individual skills. But if we have a performance task where we can really see how they attack the problem, what strategies they've learned over time, then we're able to better see what the growth is in those particular skills. And correlating those math performance test data pieces to the final 2015 PARCC data. In kindergarten across the district, we'll be implementing the Teaching Strategies Gold Assessment. What's going to be really great about that is it calls for a lot of conferencing, so the teachers will be working much closer with the students to really get their individual data. It asks for a lot of work samples, so it's an online assessment system, so there's going to be a lot of photographing and scanning of the students at work, their actual work program, the conferencing notes, and so it's going to be, there, and as a whole district really tackling that for kindergarten. There's going to be a lot of power in having conversations between teachers across the district about what that means and what we need to continue to do to make kindergarten rigorous for our students. And then utilizing technology to streamline the assessment and the analysis practices. So again, as Karen mentioned, the Fountas and Pinnell, it's a one-on-one assessment, which is in part why we don't do it for all of our students. There is an app that we started piloting on the iPads at the end of the school year that has it all electronically. So while you're still kind of doing a running record, it's online, it's captured, and it takes away that part where the teachers have to, sit there and calculate all of the work. It's calculated for them, and it goes directly into a database. So it shortens it immensely. So that is an initiative for next year. I brought a couple of copies for you, but the coordinators have put together a little Curriculum Connections newsletter, and they're asking teachers who are interested in taking on that initiative to do that at the start of next year, and they'll be able to work with that technology and have training as a commitment throughout the year. And then finally, piloting new unit assessments in grades 3 to 5 science. So with the initiative around science next year, grades 3 to 5 will each have 2 new FOSS curriculum kits, and so we'll be utilizing the assessments out of those kits. And I know from past experience they're very rigorous, so I expect that we're going to see some really good data coming out of those.
So seeing as apparently we're bragging about students who might not show through in this group data that we're presenting, one of the things that we've done preliminary in a preliminary way, because we do have some preliminary results, is looking at our students that you saw on an earlier slide, for example, who are receiving targeted reading support, and looking at their estimated at this point student growth percentiles, and are seeing some very promising results of students who are in the 99th percentile, which means they grew more than 99% of the students like them in the state of Massachusetts, which is extremely exciting. So our work ahead is comparing, trying to pull our assessments together, comparing, looking to the extent to which one might predict the other or be in line with the other. In addition, looking to expand the Scholastic Reading Inventory to the 8th grade for this coming school year. In addition, implementing the Mathematics Assessment Resource, or MARS, performance tasks. So those are from the Silicon Valley Mathematics Project and through the Department of Education Professional Practice Innovation Grant that we had this year. One of the things that we did was tap into resources, existing resources that were out there, and partnered with the Silicon Valley Mathematics Project to try some of their performance-based assessments, which are rigorous tasks in which students really have to take what they know about math and apply it in a real scenario. And so we're looking at implementing those, probably 3 or 4 of them in the school year. and looking at and having conversations around how do we then determine growth. Again, this idea of looking at growth over the course of the year. We've also had the middle school folks have been having conversations with the elementary folks to use that as a resource as well, because they are, again, developing these performance-based tasks in math.
May I interrupt you for 1 minute?
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate at this spot to, between the advancement initiative and budget and the grant that Dr. Spalding wrote, that only how many in the state were funded?
6.
6 of these grants were funded to really pilot these internal assessments and district-determined measures. And this math assessment is so exciting that Dr. Spalding and Dr. Lagares meet with the math teachers, and they determine the questions from this huge project in California that they want to use to administer to the students, and then the project in California uses all of that data to determine what the growth should be. And so it's not internally just determining we're going to grow 4 bands and determine that's growth. We're looking at a national pilot that's really looking at what the growth is. And I would tell you that Dr. Spalding and Leif Lagares and Amy Gale, part of these grants from DESE, you have to go out during the year and in the next year and pilot the kind of work you did and share it with your peers. And when Dr. Spalding and Leif and Amy were at a presentation, the Canton superintendent texted me and said, who are these 3 geniuses? And so, again, this work, the advancement initiative, your drive for internal assessment, combined with the grant that Dr. Spalding led and piloted and wrote, are very, very exciting initiatives. And you heard her refer to it might be targeted to the middle school, bringing middle school teachers in the summer and on Saturdays, but the work is really being driven K-12. So to each of you for leading these initiatives and for expanding beyond the advancement budget to really make this happen.
Thank you. And then finally, in terms of the science work, as I alluded to earlier, we spent a lot of time this year piloting these new curriculum materials and piloting some of those assessments, both piloting the assessments that came with the curriculum materials as well as having conversations about how aligned they were with standards and what changes we might need to make. And so we will continue that work. That work's actually continuing probably as I speak at the moment, as well as this summer and into the fall. And in addition, looking at creating tasks where students are required to construct responses where they're using evidence such as data observations, those kinds of things in science, which mirrors the kinds of assessments that we are doing in the English language arts as well, where kids have to pull evidence from text. And so we're really trying to both create rigorous, appropriate assessments within each of the subject areas, but also connect that work across the disciplines.
At the high school, we have a little bit of a challenge through the generosity and the hard work of the school committee approving the early release days. It provided us some collaborative time last year to really start honing in and developing common assessments for our midterms and our final exams. But for our next steps ahead, talking to Courtney Walsh in the math department is piloting mathematics performance tasks to really generate some growth data. As I alluded to, open responses. We want to make sure that we're catching kids at an earlier time period as opposed to just looking at the midterm exams and the final exams. Developing unit assessments that could pull this data out. We're actually very thrilled with Karen Cahill, who is our new director of guidance, who worked very hard on our schedule, which hopefully buys us a little more collaborative time during the school day within departments. So we hope that we can get that off the ground and move that forward at a much faster pace. For pretty much all of the subjects, we're reviewing and revising the format of the mid-year exam to either mirror the PARC assessment or the pre-AP. Pre-AP, particularly in our science, we're really looking at that and also focusing on the new generation science skills and curriculum. As far as our implement and review and revise common rubrics for persuasive essays, again, we want to figure out a way that we could get into all of our English classes, develop these assessments, and be able to collect some meaningful data, again, to indicate growth or illustrate growth in all of our students. Can I just make one comment? Another thing that we were talking about in terms of our data, and I want to make this very clear, when we look at the number of students that did not pass a final exam, I want to make it very clear that that does not mean that they did not pass the course for the year. It just means that on that particular assessment, that they did not perform up to par. And that will be another lens that we would have to look at to see whether or not that final exam correlates, A, if you look at biology with the MCAS scores in their final grade, chemistry, whether they took AP or whether they took honors, we need to look at that because there's so many different layers that you have to consider.
May I add one more point? It occurred to me as I was watching the slides and listening to my colleagues that someone watching at home or even you watching here may walk away with the conclusion that the only assessments we do are in math and ELA and science, and those are the only subjects that we ever talk about, and that's absolutely not the case. So I just want to publicly acknowledge the work, especially of Dr. Noreen Diamond-Burdett, who developed with her art folks and music folks some common assessments and performance assessments in those areas. And so they are very excited about the work, and we're very excited about the work that they've been doing and thinking about how technology can assist where kids could individually record their voice or their performance on their instrument onto a computer that could analyze it and give the teacher some data. So just some really exciting things happening in other subject areas other than math and science and ELA.
Really?
Well, I was waiting. Usually the person else go first.
Sarah.
Well, thank you for putting all this together. I would just like to say, I know data always kind of concerns me in terms of how it can be looked at, and I also think that some of comparing a mid-year exam to an assessment is somewhat different because you have that whole factor of how much kids study versus an assessment. So that always, I don't think we can kind of compare each level like easily. But I'd also like to say that I think that this would be even better to look at if we had, and some of the teachers have seen some of this data, but a lot of this data hasn't been shared with teachers yet. And I think the most valuable use of this data is really internally with the teachers and coming up with strategies and how to solve the problems and their insight into what might be problems or success stories. So I think it would be even more valuable in looking at this after that. I think sometimes we're in a real hurry to get this data so we can come to these meetings and look at it and give some answers, and that's fine, but I think that this would be somewhat even more, I hope that it's this data that's shared, you share it with your departments and your teachers internally, and they use it to improve in ways we can improve and build on success stories that we already have. You're already talking about using next steps and things like that, but that's my main focus on this. I think hearing that some of the teachers haven't even been shared this is, somewhat like, I think we have a next story here to see how they want to use it and what they think they can do and improve upon things. So that was my main point.
So we have a number of protocols that we use that are actually being used at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level, both in particular for looking at individual pieces of student work, so student work protocols that focus on evidence of understanding in the work, as well as protocols around data and through the grade level meetings, grade level facilitators at the elementary level, our golden common planning time that we have at the Pierce Middle School, and in development golden it sounds like common planning time at the high school, absolutely conduct that work on an ongoing basis. And I couldn't agree with you more that's where changes in practice happen. That's where really supporting students in the way that we need to in order to support their growth happens. Absolutely.
Ms. Kelly?
Well, first of all, this is very exciting. I often refer to us as a district sort of holding our breath in years past, waiting to see what the results of MCAS were. And I think us getting this in place, or you, not us, I had nothing to do with it, getting these assessments in place is really exciting for the district. I totally agree with Ms. Padera that the information will help inform all our teachers who can then, continue to help our students perform. One of the things that sort of jumps out at me at looking at the data is we have different metrics. And I would love, granted, this is the first time we're looking at this, but I would love for us not to just have pass-fail, because I think pass-fail only tells not, part of the story. I think whatever the district decides in terms of how that gets metered out, I mean, certainly with MCAS, we're used to advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and failing. If that's, the metrics, that's fine. And then in terms, I truly appreciate, as my fellow members I'm sure will start laughing, that the English and French data has been broken out at least for 2 grades. I think it needs to be broken out for all the elementary grades. And I also think there was, no 8th grade information for one of the data points, I think. Is that correct?
Probably the Scholastic Reading Inventory.
Correct.
Yeah, we're rolling that out for 8th grade this coming school year.
Got it, okay. So, but this is really exciting in terms of really looking at all of, across the whole district, how we're succeeding throughout the year. And then how, hopefully, we'll be matching that up with the new position, the data person, and matching it up to our assessment at the end of the year, and hopefully everything will fall together. But this is very exciting, and thank you very much for all the effort that's gone into it.
Mr. Zulus?
I have a more of a big picture question, and I'm not sure to whom it should be directed, and that is, given the apparent rigor and breadth of the assessments and the testing that's going on internally, what's the value add that we get from MCAS and PARC beyond that?
I would share with you our concern this year, and be very strategically, particularly for our freshmen, at the end of the year. Oh, sorry. Particularly for our freshmen, we were very concerned about all of the assessments. At the end of the year, in a 3-week span, they had a final exam, they had PARC, and some students had PARC and then the MCAS. And we were concerned about test fatigue, things like that. I hope one way or the other they make a decision on whether or not they're going to move to PARC, which it seems like that's the driving force. We won't have as much, but my biggest concern is these smaller chunks at different intervals throughout the year, leading up to it so you can catch kids earlier. And then the bigger picture in terms of what we do, is one of the things that we would definitely have to have a discussion, particularly at the high school level, because there's so much testing with AP, SAT, PARC, MCAS, midterms, and finals.
I would just add one piece that especially the performance-based tasks and such that we are developing are intentionally very authentic and very real world. And so on the one hand, the assessment is an assessment, and we're using the data and reflecting on the data. On the other hand, the assessment is also a learning experience for students where they are digging deeply in multiple layers and in a complex way. And so it's not that we are stopping the learning and now we're going to assess today and then we're going to go back to the learning, but we're really trying to merge those in the best way possible. The reality of our work is we have to do PARC or MCAS or whatever that's going to look like, but that the kinds of assessments and experiences that we plan for students are both informative for us, but also contribute to the actual learning, and that's what we're aspiring to.
And just one more addition at the elementary level. One thing that I think of immediately is the reading assessment. So, even with the Fountas and Pinnell, while the students are reading it independently, the questions come from the teachers orally. And so there's also that piece of, them having to read the questions themselves, grapple with the options on the page that we don't get with the Fountas and Pinnell assessment, that we're able to get a bigger picture from MCAS or PARC around that skill as well.
Okay.
And if I might, Ms. Kelly alluded to it, when you have these internal assessments, and now when you have your MCAS data, your PARC data, or your SAT data, your AP data, you'll find out the correlation between and among all of these assessments to this state and national wide. And so on a larger audience, you're finding if your assessments are the correct indicators. Going school to school, meeting with the teachers and the department heads, the feedback that John Phelan and I received was that this has equipped the teachers with more information on students than they've ever had before. And when I look at the high school level, to see high school teachers all sitting down, analyzing the mid-semesters exams, and did an A from you merit an A from Dr. Pavlicek? And what was the quality, what were the quality of the answers, and what's expected from all of the teachers in freshman English? And so the dialogue around instruction, the dialogue around student achievement, and we talk about students who are at risk and assisting students. When we sat down with the elementary principals and Dr. Spalding and Mr. Jett, when you look at the actual data, John Phelan and I shared that they went over every single child. It's no child is left behind. So what is the challenge for children that are excelling? What are we putting in place? Who are the staff members that we can use in the classroom to differentiate the achievement for children who are at risk? You heard Dr. Spalding about the targeted instruction at the middle school, which is only just now starting, and I merit a tremendous amount of that, of Dr. Spalding having been at the elementary level, and really saying students who aren't reading at the 6th and 7th grade, what are the skills that we know from elementary people that we can put in, but also children that are excelling or at the top of the spectrum and are mastering the material. What are the materials, and what's the curriculum, and what are the instructional practices to move those children ahead? So for me, it's to the point we're not going to wait for May and June to find out the next year. All through the year, we're going to know what level those children are at, those students are at, who needs more instruction, and who needs to be challenged, and who's ready for the challenge.
And actually, Mary, you kind of hinted at the next question that I have, which is, if the data among the internal assessments and MCAS and PARC is not correlative, which should we focus on? Which is better, I guess?
Good question.
I mean, maybe that's not maybe that never happens, but if the correlations aren't there, what does that tell us?
James was just saying we won't have the PARC results this year to really know. I mean, I would say, though, if they're not correlating, then it's still looking at both, because it's looking at what is our assessment lacking, and, thinking about our math right now, like I said, it's kind of isolated in a sense that doesn't have performance tasks, and those are some of the questions they may be asked on MCAS. So I think it's thinking about what we are not asking that we might need to be asking to get better data, but also taking the state data with a small grain of salt, of knowing that some students perform really well and they're doing really well, and they just don't necessarily do as well in that setting or that structure, and that it's not necessarily that we need to go back and reteach something. Maybe it's giving them some different organizational skills or studying habits or another piece of component like that.
And if I might add, before Dr. Spalding and Mr. Jett address that, when I sat at this table years ago with a school committee member, Jeff Cruikshank, he said when we started MCAS, is that going to eliminate the creativity and the creative ideas of teachers? And so my feeling in answering your question is that every student in the Milton Public Schools, we want to provide them the education that they can excel and achieve to the best of their ability on every one of those tests. If it's MCAS, if it's SAT, if it's advanced placement. So we can't say when the advanced placement results come back, we taught a really outstanding statistics class, but we didn't teach the standards that were being tested. And so, to me, it's the audience of the classroom, the audience of the grade level, the audience of the school, and our students are going to compete in a global society, so we have to give them those skills. We have to be teaching the standards that have been determined by the Common Core. And again, you have to walk through the schools as you have and see the creativity that these teachers add to that instruction. So you've really identified what people feel about testing, and so you don't hear anyone say, and I'm very proud of it in the Milton Public Schools, that they teach to the test. But they have to understand the standards, they have to understand what's being taught, what's being expected. Karen?
You pretty much just said what I was going to say. In the end, if we develop students into excellent readers and excellent mathematicians and excellent scientists, they're going to do just fine on the assessments that they take. And so our work with these internal assessments is to provide for them the best possible education we can, and get them to those levels and get data and collect data that helps us achieve that. And in the end, the other stuff will come.
And one other note to that, a very poignant remark from one of the teachers with these internal assessments. She said, I've never been equipped with as much data on students as I have now when I sit down with a parent.
The final two comments is just critical thinkers and problem solvers. If we work on those skills, we think that the students will be fine. There's not much more to be said than what hasn't already been said.
So first, I would say it's quite exciting that we're building our own database of internal assessment data. And as Dr. McNeil-Jamai said, I think the more data points we have, the better. And so I think the work that you've done will be incredibly valuable for you and your teams. I think it'll be valuable for us as we start our planning process. So I've just got an elementary, a middle, and a high school question. But the biggest one is, as the superintendent said, I think the idea here is that everywhere, everyone's working to give each Milton Public School student the best experience that they can, but the broadest range of skills that they can. So do we have enough, and this is one of those questions where I asked, I don't want the answer you think we want to hear. Do we have enough opportunities to share best practices, to have that discussion about what's working, what's not? Do we have enough of those opportunities at different points during the year so that, as the superintendent said, we're acting immediately rather than waiting until the end of the year for data and conclusions? Do we have enough opportunities? Should we have more?
I would say, do we have opportunities? Yes. Do we have enough? No, there's never enough. As we just alluded to, the first time we were able to pilot the early release days were some of the first times we were able to get all teachers together, not only by departments, but even having discussions across curriculum, content areas, excuse me. So I think with our new schedule this year, we're going to have more opportunities. That was something that we put as a charge to really build in, to have these opportunities to develop more of these common assessments throughout in unit assessments and look at the data and turn around the information a little faster. So you're getting that information back to the teachers, having the discussion so teachers could then, that's informed instruction and teachers could catch students early on as opposed to a mid-year and a final. So I think, do we have opportunities? Yes. Enough? No.
Thank you.
Do you want to hear from each level on that
Not
question?
particularly, but yeah, go ahead.
Too late.
James said it
I'll just
pretty well.
agree with Mr. Jett.
Yeah, right.
Yes, we absolutely have opportunities, and especially at the middle school, we have built-in opportunities for sustained conversation around curriculum instruction and assessment. But quality professional development and quality work around best practices comes through sustained, ongoing, focused opportunities for teachers instead of sort of one-shot deals. And so the more we can aspire to that, and we've done a lot of work in that area and come a long way, but the more we can do that, the more likely it is that conversations around practice will actually result in changes in practice in the classroom and then
Yes.
student learning.
Yes.
So you're going to hear from all three, I guess.
Okay.
Same answer. There are opportunities, not enough. And I just wanted to share that this past year, grades 3 to 5, they did a lot of work with data facilitators, and that's something that's expanding this year. So I think that'll be really helpful to have one teacher per grade, per school, come together with the coordinators and really talk through the data and then go back to the individual schools and disseminate that conversation. So really being able to connect the elementary schools better, I think, is definitely a next step.
Great.
May I add one note to that? With the professional development opportunities that we have, these half professional development days, but Ms. Kelly and I had discussed professional development, and you had mentioned a model that in another district, the summer professional development and teachers coming. So it was very exciting. At the elementary level, we had 4 days around the 4th of July, and we had 35 to 50 teachers each of the days. So the coordinators said to me, and I referred to Mrs. Kelly, that if we identify a week when families are making their plans in future summers, and we target that's the week, because to get 5 of 7 teachers, what about the other 2 teachers? But if we say this is the week, and it's very interesting when you have statewide conferences, people begin to plan their summer vacations around, well, this is when I have to be free. So the response around that week, the week after school ended, again, that wasn't the planning because of the snow days when we started, but the coordinators said, and Ms. Kelly had referred to this model somewhere else, if we could make this the week, Mary, district-wide, and then all teachers could count on 1, 2, 3, or 4 days and drive that professional development so they'll all be present, as many as possibly can be present, rather than us identifying 2 days in August that, plans have been made, family commitments. So that was a very, very exciting. Again, that's not, to Mr. Walker's point, the continual, regular, common planning time during the year, but it's a time when all the teachers, again, can be together and plan for the next year, and really for some of that curriculum into implementation and orientation to new curriculum. And I know that that's happening at PS all during this summer as a result of the grant led.
Thank you.
So you might want to stay right at the table if they don't mind.
Do we need all 3?
Well, if we move to the handbooks.
Oh,
If
okay.
anyone had a handbook particular question, would that be all right?
Absolutely.
So moving to item D, school handbooks. The school committee approves the individual school handbooks, and so I said to the principals, they're going to be really thankful to the school committee that these handbooks have been edited. They've worked. I want to compliment all of you and your administrative assistants. The handbooks have been sent to our attorney, Paige Tobin, who has read every handbook, edited them, and now the principals wanted me to indicate to the school committee that areas are highlighted, the last staffing changes, perhaps they have sent in their dates about their open houses, and they're waiting for approval from Central, but pending your approval tonight, those handbooks will be finished during the summer. And we had been brainstorming about perhaps this year sending the handbooks out via online, and then following up with families in the mail, any family that wants the handbook hard copy. But even sending the handbooks online would require 100% return of the sign-off sheet from the parents. So any parent or guardian who wanted the hard copy will deliver that to their homes. But if the parents, we could try it this year and see how the parents felt about the online handbooks. But again, we would look to 100% sign-off on all of the sign-off requirements in those handbooks. So if anyone, Ms. Kelly, you did have a question at Finance Subcommittee. I rang Dr. Spalding, so you identified an antiquated part, so we thank you. There was a sign-off, if you don't want the U.S. mail delivery to your home from the Milton Public Schools or the PS School, Dr. Spalding said that shouldn't be in there, Ms. Gormley, and so that's been deleted from the handbook. But the more eyes that look at those handbooks, and even in our office, the administrative assistants told the story, it will make you feel good about the work that you did and the school committee reading them. They say that they go over the entire handbooks with their children, and it requires families to sign off. Mr. Jett said that really it's a code of conduct, and it's a time for families to go over what the expectations of the school and the principals are. So any comments, you have the right is right here.
Ms. Sheridan?
I'll just say, I think that commend everyone on, as Ms. Gormley was saying, having it done now. And I just feel like this is a very reflective practice, because it's almost doing it now at the end of the year. You're really looking back and seeing what worked and what may not have worked, or things that you want to tweak while it's fresh in your mind. So I think on so many levels, it's a great time to do it. And I think that they're thorough and wonderful documents. So thank you for all your efforts on that.
Ms. Kelly?
So the policy subcommittee will be taking up the student discipline policy, and I think we're going to recommend slight changes to the way the policy is written at present. And I apologize, but I haven't seen how it's reflected in the handbooks. So if the committee agrees with our recommendation, I would just ask that we, reflect, make sure that whatever we agree to is what actually shows up in the handbook, if that's the level of detail.
Well, it is, because Attorney Tobin, I asked if your policy has to go in the handbooks, and she said no, all of the aspects of the discipline policy are integrated, but you made changes as of today. So I'll send them back to Paige Tobin to make sure that they're updated and with the latest information.
Well, if I may, I spoke with Paige, and so what we have to present is consistent with the handbooks and is consistent with, her recommendation. So I think that may have already happened.
Great.
Do you want to vote those?
Do we need to?
I think so. I think, did I?
Okay.
I think I put down vote. I believe that the school committee votes the
Do I have
handbooks.
a motion?
So move. Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Ms. Bagley Jones.
Maybe I should have stated it, because
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
so
you
moved.
hadn't, you hadn't made the motion, I'm sorry.
You said so moved.
But you hadn't said anything.
Yeah, you just said, I have a motion, and then she said so
Well, we
moved.
said, do we have to approve the handbooks?
Okay.
I'm clear. I'm the acting school committee secretary, so.
That doesn't mean you're right.
Okay, on the motion that we're now all clear on. All in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Now they can stay right at the table. We'll move to school year 2013-14 discipline data. For the viewing public, just to recap for the school committee, we had Attorney Tobin present the new discipline rules and regulations to the leadership team. She'll be following up this summer with another session expanding the team. Attorney Tobin presented at the last school committee meeting. Member Zulus asked a very appropriate question, the impact, what would be the numbers, and so for the school committee to know, and the viewing public, the principals and their administrative assistants, track that data, and they report it into DESE at the end of the month. But each of the principals has given to me their data. I'll pass it out to you. What we're doing now is setting up an appointment to follow up to Chairman Walker and Mr. Zulis's request. What will, with our data this year, and Chairman Walker asked me to get that data for the last 3 years, what we anticipate, and you've asked me to come back, what will be the financial impact on the district for meeting the regulations and rules of the new discipline law. So at the high school, there were 178 external incidents that brought about suspensions, 1 expulsion. At Pierce Middle School, 65 incidents that resulted in suspension, 1 expulsion. Glover, 1 suspension, no expulsion. Tecker, 1 suspension, no expulsions. Collycott, 1 suspension, no expulsion. Cunningham, 3 suspensions, no expulsions. So I'll share that with the members, and then at the next meeting, report out to you what our plans are to meet those new regulations and rules for providing instruction for all students upon a 1-day or more suspension, and the financial impact on the budget. And lastly, with the principals here, Chairman Walker said, and Ms. Kelly suggested, may I move middle school health position to the next agenda item?
Can I ask a question, though, about the data that you just gave? Are there things from those, especially from the high school, of things that, patterns that you see, things that we need to be aware of, things that, I mean, in terms of funding, or, not that we have any money to give you, but
Again, I really think it's a matter of the tripod. It's the family, it's the student, it's the school, it's us being a little more proactive, it's us developing a better rapport with the students, and really understanding what the students come to us with every single day. Again, we're expected to educate them, but there's so many emotional things and life events that we really have no control over, that we have to contend. And I know that the high school numbers are skewed, but our leverage and our arm extends well beyond the school day, because we have night events, we have weekend events, we have vacation events where we're still monitoring students at these events. And so I just want to make sure that the public is aware of that. But I think that we have a very good handle on the discipline at the high school. I think that, most students feel very comfortable coming in there in a day-to-day. And we take the opportunities, whether in large assemblies or gatherings, to make sure that we reiterate some of these serious components that could get students in trouble, in hopes that we are being proactive so they don't cross that line. And I have to say, for the most part, 99.9, I would take Milton High School over any other school in the Commonwealth. And not because I'm the principal currently, I just think that we have some great students at the high school.
thank you, perfect.
So moving to the middle school.
Ms. Kelly?
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry. Just in terms of analysis of that data, I think a couple of things we talked about was if a tutor was needed at home, if someone was in that setting, would we need to create special classrooms for behavioral issues? But the other thing that I think we mentioned in previous discussions on this was working with teachers to make sure that all work is online to the extent possible. And as I read some of the handbooks, it made me think about students that are out sick. And I think there's something about if you're sick 3 days in a row or something, then you can come in and get extra work. But one day in the life of a student can be pretty dramatic in terms of what you might miss. So working on that, and I'm not sure that there's financial impacts on that, but are there things that we would need to do to help achieve that? I think that would go a long way.
Great. I think on our follow-up list in your green folder is that EdLine and the expansion of EdLine, and we even have internal discussions, is that the right vehicle we should be using? But to your point about tutors, classrooms, Mr. Jett and I began to discuss a model. We're going to meet with the rest of the leadership team and then talk to Paige Tobin and then bring to you what the impact would be.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Middle school health.
The middle school health position, you have a handout in your packet from Dr. Spalding.
Yeah,
Oh, are they leaving?
only one left.
Thank you.
So again, we have a Health and Wellness Committee chaired by members Bagley Jones and Ms. Padera, and Dr. Spalding has championed the integration of health, really the return of health instruction to the middle school. I'll let you articulate better than I do your vision of what should happen at the middle school for every single student. I want to compliment member Becky Padera, and you worked tirelessly, did the background, presented at Finance Subcommittee, did the follow-up questions, and this initiative, this program will change the lives of middle schoolers for the rest of their lives, and I want to thank you. So if you and Member Padera maybe want to present, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, all of you, for the work that you do on behalf of all of the students in the Milton Public Schools, excuse me, especially those at the Pierce Middle School. As a group supporting their full growth, their learning, but all of the other important things and work that we do with them, both as a full school committee, but also the work on the subcommittee, the Health and Wellness Subcommittee, with school committee member Kristen Bagley Jones, as well as school committee member Becky Padera. And so again, thank you so much for supporting all of what we do with students. And anyone who has ever been in charge of a student who is in that 11-year-old to 14-year-old or 15-year-old age range, whether it's been raising a child or caring for a child or teaching a child within that age range, you know well that is a critical time period in terms of developing in students a strong sense of self and the ability to make good decisions, and good decisions around healthy eating habits, around physical activity, around risky behavior, and if we are able to, at that critical time period, that shift, that transition from childhood to adulthood, if we are able to give them the skills and give them the positive sense of self and ability to, even when peer pressure is at play, to make those good decisions. If we can do that in that age range, they're going to carry that into high school, they're going to carry that into college. And those skills are as critical as the math skills, the science skills, the ELA skills, all of those skills. Mr. Jett was absolutely right. It's working with families, it's working with students, it's working with the community. But we have a responsibility, I think, to provide for students that well-rounded experience that really supports them not only through those years where they are pushing the limits and trying out the rules and they think they're invincible. It's the Superman and Wonder Woman time period of life where nothing can harm them. And it is again our responsibility as those who work with that critical age period to really give them the skills. And so I say that because I want to thank, both on a professional level and a personal level, as someone who has been committed to that age level for a really long time, that the notion of having physical education and health education for every student, so that every time I come back to school committee, I can say to you with confidence that every child who has passed through the doors at Pierce Middle School in grades 6, 7, and 8 have had physical education and health education. I can honestly sleep better at night because that is a critical time period in their life, and it's a critical body of knowledge and set of skills that they will take with them and will find success in other areas because they have that skill set. And it does require an additional request in terms of support in terms of health staffing, which I know you are now familiar with. And I just want to thank all of you in terms of your work and advocacy in this area. And I can, upon reflection, I'll just sort of hopefully not confuse people more, but just sort of briefly, we've had a lot of conversation. School committee member Becky Padera many conversations and bouncing ideas, and with the superintendent as well as trying to figure out what it might look like in terms of a schedule, and want to thank my leadership team as well. And so what we have come up with is shifting from a 2-day schedule to a 4-day schedule that would ensure that 7th and 8th graders had 45 days, all 7th and 8th graders had 45 days of PE and 45 days of health over the course of a year. And then for 6th graders, it would be 22 days of PE and 22 days of health within a half a year. And the reason for the difference is that we have a difference in the structure of schedules for 6th grade and for 7th and 8th grade, whereas 6th graders only have 1 slot for an elective, whereas 7th and 8th graders have 2 slots.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
And it's wonderful what you did, and I know Becky worked really hard on it. And since I've been on the Health and Wellness Subcommittee, we've moaned about the lack of health educators. I've moaned here about it, really.
We've moaned with you.
Yes, and it's really, and just seeing the difference over the years as a parent here of what kids got, and then what they didn't get, and then what they didn't get even more, because it's not like kids wake up in high school and say, oh, I think I'll engage in risky behaviors. I mean, it happens well before that. So it's just really appreciated the work that you and Becky put in, and Mary and John and everybody else to get this position in there. I think it's a really smart move, and I'm really glad that you're such a champion for it.
Anyone? No? Ms. Kelly?
Oh.
Mr. Zoos?
No, one of the things that came up in Finance Subcommittee on Tuesday morning was the net financial impact, and we're hoping to get a read on the net financial impact if we could.
And along with that, before Dr. Pavlicek replies, Mr. Zulus and Ms. Kelly had asked that question, and Ms. Kelly had asked the pre-question, with putting this elective in, would there be a decrease in other electives that we could identify staff? Dr. Spalding, not to put you on the spot, but we spent time, and I'd like you to share what you thought you could do in that area or not be able to do.
Absolutely. So it would, if students found themselves in a health class that didn't exist prior to that because of an additional staffing, they would obviously not be in something else. But it doesn't necessarily result in a reduction in staff elsewhere, because our elective classes can be as high as 30 students. Course is actually even higher than that, thanks to the amazing Mrs. Sykes. But so if you, as a scenario, sort of imagine 5 sections of some other elective that might already have 28, 29, or 30 students, and you're collecting, 5, let's say 4 or 5 off the top of each of those 5 sections and creating this health class, you're not able at that point to reduce the staffing of that other elective, because it hasn't reduced the numbers enough. And it sort of a related question is if, in a shift to what would then be required physical education and health for every student, which doesn't exist at the moment, certainly that means that there would be some other elective for a student who hadn't taken PE before, or health that they weren't taking because they were taking PE or health. But that's why we work so hard on figuring out this 4-day schedule to still ensure that there were a number of other holes, another number of other places where those other electives could fit in, so students could still experience a number of electives, from computer to drama to the performance electives and that kind of thing. And that's also why we did the half year for the 6th grade, to enable a student to be able to experience still a number of electives, as opposed to only having PE and health and one other thing or something. Did that answer that question?
So we won't be able to have a savings.
Okay, so savings aside, going from a 2-day rotation to a 4-day rotation, does that mean that some of the classes that I presently get every other day are now every 3rd day, every 4th day? How does that all?
Right, so from a student's perspective, they're actually, with the exception of the PE and health, they are going to experience electives in the same way. So on a 4-day schedule, for example, if I'm a student who has chorus, so right now I have chorus all year long on day 1, so every other day I'm going to chorus. In a 4-day schedule, I would have chorus on days 1 and day 3. So I'm still experiencing chorus every other day, but it's on day 1 and day 3. And the reason why we shifted to the 4-day schedule instead of just tucking, PE or health into our existing 1- and 2-day schedule is because it allowed us, at least for 7th and 8th grade, for students to have physical education, especially all year long. So they will be guaranteed physically active at least 1 period a week, sometimes 2, depending on how the 4 days fall, for the entire year, instead of being physically active from September till January, and then we don't have PE anymore, and so you're not going to have that for the rest of the year. So it allows for that. So the PE, from the student's perspective, the PE health experience would be, I might have PE on day 1, but my day 3 is my health. And so that's how I go through they're kind of locked in together as kind of one elective when we sort of think about it in terms of scheduling.
So I'm sorry, for some reason it's not connecting in my head. So this past year, if I took band, I had it every other day.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Going forward, when I take band, I will have it
Every other day.
every other day.
Yep.
So those types of things all remain the same.
Exactly.
Got it.
Mr. Zulus?
Just on your answer, Karen, while it won't result in a reduction of any other staff, it sounds like it might lead to a reduction in some class sizes. Is that fair to say, in electives, or?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think it's also, I think I understood from Finance Committee that with respect to the physical education, this is a statutory requirement. So we need the position to meet a statutory requirement.
We do.
Ms. Kelly?
So I think it brings up a policy question. I think the policy subcommittee needs to take up this one as well. I'm not sure whether it's statute, but certainly DESE says that every child from kindergarten through grade 12 should be taking PE, right? PE/health, however you want to break that up, which I think then leads to high school, where I don't know that we're in compliance with that, and I think it needs to be considered. So I think from a policy perspective, we need to put something in writing that says this is what we're doing, and if I'm not sure that we can meet all the requirements this year, but certainly it should be the goal of us getting to a place where we can say that, as DESE requires, we are offering PE and health for every grade.
I thought it was just PE.
It is just PE.
Just PE is required.
Dr. Pavlicek, and while you have the floor, Mr. Zulus's previous question about net financial impact, too.
The statute requires that health be taught, and it lists, it's Chapter 71, it says there are certain things that have to be taught. It doesn't specify how often, in what years, or anything like that. It just says a student has to be taught the following list of about 9 or 10 things that are involved with health education. It's part of the definition of what a school has to offer. It's a separate issue for PE, where that was actually put into the law that you're supposed to have PE every year. I think that's the only thing that's actually in the statute about what has to be offered at what frequency in the public school in Massachusetts.
But not to the amount each year.
It doesn't say, it just has to be offered every year. It doesn't specify an amount, but just that much. To Mr. Zulus's question of the cost of a teacher, using our standard ballpark is roughly $55,000. We would be offering health to more students than currently receive it, so there would be a cost for curricular materials to cover that. That would probably be in the few thousands of dollars anyway to bring in enough materials to support those children. But there would certainly be, text materials, supplies, sort of needs to equip a classroom. So probably in, a ballpark is a $60,000-ish range, I'd say.
Ms. Kelly?
And the recommended source for that funding?
We're still playing out our scheduling for the fall with faculty and so forth. We have, we have staff exchange that's happened this year. We also, we're looking at putting schedules together and seeing what our staffing needs are. There are certain staff positions that haven't been hired yet. It's a little bit in flux yet. I think there's money in our personnel budget there will be money in our personnel budget to handle it. But I'm just, it's a little early to specify it's going to be from this exact line at the moment.
But it would be, to Ms. Kelly's request, the priority of staff exchange. But other than that,
Ms. Kelly?
So I'm going to bring my financial perspective to this. And just like anything else that we do in the school system, this is something that we should be doing. But as I stated at Finance Subcommittee, this is the most positions that we have added before we've even hit the year in my history as a school committee member. And every time we add a position, there's a potential hit to the health, town side budget. And so I'm very concerned, although I totally agree that it's a needed position, and quite frankly, shame on me for not knowing that, number one, it was required, but number two, that we didn't have anything close to that in place. But I will be voting against this because I think if all indications are correct, we will be going into an override year where we will be asking people to increase their taxes for a lot of different things, and I think we need to go into this year, I think, with caution. And so, unfortunately, although I believe it's, the right thing to do, I wish we could have carved it out of our present schedules, which I think would be much more difficult to do, and certainly the timing of it would not be great, because we wouldn't be able to inform that perhaps some of the things that we're holding untouched might have to be, instead of every other day, it might be every third day or every third and fifth or whatever. That would be a much more difficult thing at this point in the cycle of scheduling to impact, to put forward and then to communicate. But for that reason, for those reasons, I will be voting against this position.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Can I ask a question of Director Pavlicek?
Absolutely.
So when you, or Mary said that it would be the funding for this position would be the priority from the, I'm blanking.
Staff exchange.
Yes, can you explain for folks that are listening what that means?
Well, our budget is always based on, when we put it together in December and January, carrying our staff forward into the next year. We did have some retirements this year. As a result, we will replace them with other people. Generally speaking, people who make less money. So there is a certain amount of play in our personnel budget, and our personnel budget is large. I mean, it's the majority of what we do are people. And so until we don't even have all of our staff hired for the fall yet. So we're still looking at exactly what that personnel budget is. I think the personnel budget for this year is going to be in line, even with an extra position, in line with our budgeting. I'm not concerned that it won't be, because we do know the people who've retired or resigned or were not rehired, but we don't know the 100% of our replacements yet, so I can't say with absolute certainty our personnel budget for next year is X. And that probably won't happen until hopefully before the school year starts, but there's always a little flux even beyond that sometimes. So I think we'll have a better handle in another month or so.
and if I might, to Ms. Kelly, do you mind?
Go right ahead.
To Ms. Kelly's point, we're very conscious of the positions, and for the school committee, and the viewing public. We added the kindergarten teacher. We had enrollment increases, so we're looking at tuitions. So what Finance Subcommittee does is keeps a running tally of what we're looking to add, where that funding's coming from. So the additional kindergarten teacher, we had additional tuitions. We're looking at, in the special education world, the needs of the students, and there was a reduction, but there was also the elimination of a teacher at another level. We looked at the 3 advancement, but you're right, one of the advancement we increased, but that funding was already in the budget. And so you're right about the additions. We're watching our K-1 numbers, but doing this scheduling now, making the assignments, other than the K-1 that I keep you updated on those numbers every Tuesday morning, I don't see that would have any other requests. We're actually made the schedules at the middle and high school, and the assignments we did today for grades 2 through 5, and we're watching every single week who's coming in. So I don't foresee, but with 4,000 children, we'll be coming back for any additional positions at this time. But to your point, we watch it. We have to identify where the funds come from.
Ms. Padera?
Yeah, I would just like to say I totally understand this is late in the year to be adding this position, but, Dr. Spaulding and I worked on it a lot with health and wellness with Kristen Bagley-Jones, and at first we did really just think it was a scheduling issue, and then as we worked along we realized it was more of a staffing issue, that we couldn't accommodate everyone, which was our goal, that every middle schooler should have some health. And I just think should be one of our highest lists of priorities. I mean, financially, I understand we have to be careful about positions, but as you said, we did add other positions this year, and this is just such a huge priority that every student at this age especially, entering in 6th grade, we can't wait one more year to let a huge amount of children in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade not receive any health education whatsoever. It just should be at the top. If we had a list of priorities, I would put it near the top. I mean, just to say, well, we'll look at it for next year, that lets another round of kids go and have issues that we could have prevented by just educating them and their families, because that should be part of what a health education program is. It's educating them and their families while they're still talking to their families and providing that education. And this is the minimum of what we can do, and we can look at the law that says we should be doing it, and we could say, well, it doesn't say how much time. That's not the way we should be looking at it. If they're saying we should do it, we should do what we think is appropriate, and if we think it's important, then we have to set it as a priority. So I know you kind of agree with me on that, and I know that you're the financial part of that, Member Kelly, but yeah, I have to say that part of it. It's just, for me, it's a huge priority, knowing that we're not offering a health education to a huge group. Half of our middle schoolers is just, we can't wait one more year.
Thank you to you and to Dr. Spaulding and to the Health and Wellness Committee for all your work on this. Would you care to put that into a motion?
I would move to vote approval of the middle school health position. Appropriate the money.
It's a .8, right?
Second? Do we have a second?
It'd be at least a .8. I was thinking it's probably a 1.
I second
Is that Ms. Sheridan? Ms. Kelly?
Even though we were voting against it, one other thing that we did discuss at Finance Subcommittee was the potential of having it be a more flexible position in it being PE/health, so that as scheduling issues perhaps, go into future years, that there wouldn't be an issue with how that position is applied in the schedule. So I don't know whether anyone would want to take that into consideration, but I just wanted to mention it.
We did talk about that, and that would be our preference, is to find someone dually served, right? Is that what, yeah.
Do you want to accept that as a friendly amendment, or do you want to talk
I
about
brought
it
that
later?
to their attention.
Would that be a requirement, or?
Do you want to put that, I don't know if that needs to go in the motion. It's just part of, we're accepting the position, we're not
Ms.
going through
Padera's
any
motion.
qualifications.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
I don't, if we put that in there, does that mean that they can only hire someone that's dually certified? Because there are hiring
Yes.
2 health positions, so I don't know if I want to,
Okay.
I'd like
that's
to
a no.
consider it, but maybe not.
Got it. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? It's 5-1.
Thank you, Dr. Spalding. Thank you, and thank you for coming out tonight.
You did, you just,
Did you get Ms. Kelly's vote?
I did. I said 5-1.
you didn't take her vote.
You asked me though?
Did
No,
you just
I'm sorry.
To be
I'm
invited.
sorry. Seeing as you said how you were going to vote before we even had a
I was still
motion.
thinking, I don't know, I think I saw her hand up. Was that
Oh,
your name?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks, Karen.
Finishing up my report, initiated by Mr. Walker and all of the members contributing. We presented at the last meeting, asked you for feedback. This Milton Public Schools year-end data report is an excellent source. I'll tell you, it's an excellent source for the school district to have all the material in one place. We want to put finality to it, but at Finance Subcommittee, never in the report before, but Member Kelly had asked me about the discipline report, Ms. Kelly. So at the end of July, I'm going to take that data from each school and add to the end of the year report the discipline. Member Walker had asked me, and if we had this report for the last 5 years, I could go to the report. We're looking up that data. And then our MCAS, AP, and SAT data will be out in July and August. That will be added. Now, the issue of comparing the English and French, as you remember, we worked with Dr. Laura O'Dwyer when we were analyzing the French-English and putting in the cap. So I've been in contact with Dr. O'Dwyer, and she had said that she would use this year's data that comes out and assign. It was really time demanding on her part, and she did it on a volunteer basis. She said that she would mentor one of her graduate students to take our August data and analyze the French-English the way she did it before. Mr. Walker has asked me to contact her, what we could do within the district using her framework so that you could have the data from last year for your retreat. We had some administrators present when Mr. Walker asked this, and they weren't readily saying that they thought they were able to do it, but I've put another email into Laura Dwyer, and we'll see. But that's a really good news story, that she'll take this year's MCAS data and perform that same analysis that she did before.
Kelly?
And I'm not sure where that previous analysis is. Is it online somewhere? I can't remember the format. I guess I wanted to see, as part of our yearly evaluation, French and English broken out because it's such a driver of our system. I'm not saying that it necessarily, I can't remember the context of what the comparison she did. So I guess if it's an elaborate comparison, I'm not so sure that that's what is needed, but it's something that, as a system, we should have every year.
Well, you know what, it will make, when we have hired the data specialist, it will be one of the priorities when the data specialist comes on. But Chairman Walker asked for the retreat, and what we can do is to show the data analyst the work that Dr. O'Dwyer did, and perhaps have this new person look at it and talk to the school committee and the administrative team about what we're looking for. So we're not making it a huge project, but we're making it a manageable project each year. Thank you. And the summer library pre-K initiative, Mr. Zulis and Ms. Padera had asked about this. Mr. Zulis, one of your members, is on the library board, and so has a soft spot for the library. I'll tell you a little secret. The Milton librarian said he practices what he preached. His family's Milton Library frequent flyers, and they speak very highly of your children and your family. So we met with the Milton Public Library staff Member Zulus initiated the meeting, all of our elementary coordinators and principals, and we're going to pilot this year reads. The librarian from the library, with the assistance of, I'll let the school committee members know, and I'll be at the reads, and our administrators and teachers. We're going to have 2 days this summer that there'll be reads at Cunningham Park. Cunningham Park is going to give us their site, and then the librarian and the group will travel to the Tucker. So this is a pilot to see what kind of audience we get at noon hour at Cunningham Park in between the swims, and then over at the Tucker, so that we're addressing both sides of the town. We're going to leaf the town and put it on Milton Cable and in the Milton Times, and we think it's going to be very exciting. We've researched peanut-free popsicles, so we're going to call it a popsicle read. With the books that many of you donated last fall on that Saturday, we're making books for all of the preschoolers who attend this read with their families, so that they leave with book bags, and we're very excited. We want to see what the response is for this summer preschool initiative. We're going to identify families that then we can correspond with our preschool and start our preschool network. So we'll watch those pilots, and I'll report into you how successful those are, and those dates will be well advertised. And we'll see. Yes, today the Mecca person came and was helping us make the bags of books, and I said, I think we'll get an audience of 20 children at each, and she thinks we might be pleasantly surprised with an larger audience. So thank you for pushing that initiative, and the pilot's on its way. Very briefly, I said to Chairman Walker that he's commented on the condition of the cleaning of the buildings, and I said at the high school, they're working around 900 children. And so this summer school enrichment program is phenomenal. It's just a wonderful combination of academics and enrichment activities. We also have the Tucker Scholars Program here, and I'm proud to tell you that we started under the leadership of Tucker Principal Uretsky, bringing rising kindergartners in to the Tucker Scholars Program that is run under the Title I program. And again, building relationships. They only had 6 children, so I encouraged them to make daily telephone calls, and now we're up to 15 children. So our goal is to increase 2 children a day. They're tracking attendance, making calls to homes, and so that's a nice partnership of children who haven't even entered the Milton Public Schools. Welcome back. Welcome to PS Middle School Camp. Famously successful. Our special ed programs at the Collycott Cunningham, the Japanese camp. Yesterday, the bridge program started. The Japanese camp isn't under our auspices, but run by Steve Shapiro, and he partners with Milton families, and children from Japan are housed in Milton houses, and he uses 2 of our classrooms. The bridge program, identifying students who might have transitioning issues from grade 8 to 9, started yesterday, getting them acclimated. I found 2 of them in with James Jett, and he told Member Walker and me, see the success of the bridge program. They've already got a familiarity with their principal, and they're mixing academics and activities, really study skills, to jumpstart their 9th grade experience. And our calculus project will start next week. We get lots of telephone calls. I want everyone to know in the viewing audience, and the Times can help us back there, that the high school schedules will be given out the first day of school. The middle school team assignments will be sent out at the end of the summer, and the elementary teacher assignments will be sent out via the U.S. mail at the end of the summer. So no classroom assignments. We're still making and adjusting class sizes across the district. First day of school, I would encourage you to go to the website. For teachers, August 25th. For students, grades 1 through 12, August 27th. And first day for kindergarten, September 2nd. I would urge you to go to the front of the website if you're the parent of the elementary, middle, or high school student, and check that summer reading requirements and make that your priority. I'll gladly take the telephone call from any Milton parent or guardian who wants me to answer any questions or get them in touch with a Milton Public School teacher, principal, or administrator around the summer reading requirements. Milton High School fall athletics, for some of you, you think the summer's just begun. For us, it's the summer, the beginning of the next school year, is very fast-paced. Monday, July 21st, those trying out will need to register in advance. Actual tryouts will begin on August 18th, and I would encourage parents and guardians of athletes to go to the website about athletic signups. That's my happenings.
Okay. Chairman's report, follow-up, we are working our way through. I think at the top of the list currently are, we're looking for a bus fee analysis. It'd be helpful if you could get that out to us in the next couple of weeks. And we have scheduled a discussion of the long-range financial planning for an upcoming finance subcommittee meeting, and we will be back to the full committee once we have that briefing at the finance subcommittee. So I'll leave it at that for now.
May I add?
Sure.
I want to apologize. We had put on the schedule one of your follow-ups, closing the achievement gap in the for children with special needs.
Right.
And Karen Clasby was on vacation this week. And so at your next regularly scheduled meeting, she'll be under my report.
Great. And superintendent's evaluation schedule, now that we have some hard dates on MCAS, raw data is released early August with a comment period that ends August 14th. Official release date is September 23rd. So we had, on our schedule that we approved, we had scheduled superintendent evaluation for our September 17th meeting. That's the superintendent evaluation discussion with a vote at the October 1st meeting. So obviously, we're not going to have the MCAS data by then. So I would propose that we move the student achievement data presentation to the October 1st meeting, the superintendent evaluation discussion to the October 15th meeting, and the superintendent evaluation vote to the November 5th meeting. And we'll send out a revised schedule. Just as a reference, I have the source document that we'll be using, and you don't need to do anything with it right now, but this is the end of cycle summative evaluation report that we'll all need to be prepared to complete and comment on in our discussion, which will now be at the October 15th meeting. Finance Subcommittee?
Yes, the first item is approval of vendor warrant. I think we have one, Mr. Pavlicek?
We have three, actually.
Oh, three, sorry.
Since our last meeting, you have signed and we have submitted the last two vendor warrants for fiscal 14, and I have the first vendor warrant for fiscal 15 here tonight, which still needs a couple more signatures. But since we're getting in the habit of voting them all, that would mean we have three to vote, even though two of them have been submitted. So the vendor warrants would be number 53 from June 27th in the amount of $341,813.30. And warrant number 54 from July 10th in the amount of $105,000, $105,503.37 and 37 cents. And the first warrant of this year, which is warrant number 3, because this is the third week of the year, they don't go by actual numbers, they go by week numbers. Warrant number 3 for fiscal 15, dated July 17th, in the amount of $42,776.81.
once more,
4.2,
I'm not doing so well as the secretary. 42,000.
776 and 81 cents.
Thank you.
So, if you don't mind, I would like to break those into two separate votes, or my proposal would be to vote those in two separate votes. The first being warrant number 53 and 54, and then the second one being the number 3 of this fiscal year. Would that be
Is that a
amenable?
motion?
Yes, I move that we vote. Why don't we start with the first one?
Yes. Madam Chair.
Warrant number 53 and 54, and the denominations that Assistant Superintendent Pavlicek described. So I would move that we approve those.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor? Ms. Kelly? 501.
And then I would move that we approve fiscal 15, warrant number 3, in the amount Dr. Pavlicek described.
Second.
On that motion, all in favor? 6-0.
And just to note, Dr. Pavlicek is working on the 15 budget, so that hopefully in the next warrant to be approved, that documentation that we've had in previous warrants will be there.
Okay. That brings us to the policy subcommittee.
What do we have tonight?
Yeah,
Policy subcommittee.
I think actually we may want to
I think
just...
I've been waiting all day for this.
I think we may want to wait a minute just to allow
Need the lights?
all of our neighbors and
Do you have the lights
friends
off?
to
You did it?
put down what they're doing and crowd around their
don't know.
televisions for the policy subcommittee
friends to
report.
turn
Call
the
the-
lights
call the
on.
friends, call the friends, alert the neighbors. It's the policy
Oh,
subcommittee.
here we go.
You know, I think it's common for us, when we think about the policy subcommittee, really one word comes to mind. And
And what word is that?
and there it is. No music tonight, no moves, no,
How do you pronounce that word?
no video, no audio.
I can say backwards, Docius alias Velistic Fragicali Lupus.
Wow, that's very good.
Very impressive.
Very good.
Is this what you're doing when you take your kids to the library? You're working on the computers and there's like...
Is inspired by my 6-year-old who loves show tunes. So, loves the Mary Poppins tune. So actually, on to the substantive work, which we've hinted at throughout the evening, which is the updates to the student discipline policies, rather. There are two separate policies to be considered tonight. And first, well, let me step back. Last month, at the last meeting, Paige Tobin reviewed the new legislative requirements for student discipline in the Commonwealth, and that led us to review our student discipline policy to make sure that they were in compliance with that new legislation. Because the legislation came on at the end of the year, at the end of the school year, and it's created a bit of a time crunch with respect to the handbooks, as Mary mentioned earlier. What we'd like to do, and what Mary Kelly and I are suggesting, and I think Mary Gormley is going to agree, we'd like to suggest that with respect to adopting these policies or these revisions to these policies, that we dispense with the first and second reading procedure, and we can do that under our existing policy adoption procedure, which is policy BGB, and we can dispense with the first and second reading if it is a response to a quote-unquote emergency condition as defined by the superintendent. Now, I think we need to think about emergency condition in context, and, you know, it seems to me there's not that many times you'll have a real emergency with respect to policy adoption, but given the time crunch here and the need to get the policy handbooks out, in that context, my understanding is that the superintendent is going to suggest that that is in the nature of an emergency.
Time emergency.
Time emergency. The first motion is to consider these updated student discipline policies, which are policy JK and policy JKF, consider them outside the normal sequence of a first and second reading, waiving the first reading and considering them based on the second reading tonight and voting on adoption tonight. So that's the motion, a little bit long-winded, but I think you get the sense of it.
So moved.
I think Becky seconded.
Did you second it?
I said so moved.
I'll second it.
I didn't know if you meant
Well,
moved it. You moved it?
I moved,
Second
yeah,
then.
sorry.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question?
Yeah?
Go ahead.
So I just have a comment on the second page, at the end of the yellow highlighted, implementation under an individual educational plan. That's what those of us who have been in special education have always called it, but now the P actually stands for program. If you look at it, or if you Google it, or it always comes up, individual educational program. So if we could just make that correction.
Bagley Jones?
I just want to clarify, I've lost sight of who did what edits.
Yeah,
So-
actually, I was going to go through that.
Oh, okay.
If we-
This is about the.
Yeah, do we want to just vote on whether we can waive the
procedural
first
motion.
reading and then I'll go through in exhaustive detail.
Oh, no, I rescind what I said.
No, I'm going to go through it. I mean, I'm going to go through it.
Please.
but- All right.
I'm kidding, I'm
right.
kidding. But this is
Okay,
about the
on
motion.
the motion
On
of...
the motion to take it out of
An
order.
emergency.
Sorry, mine was out of order too.
On the motion of an emergency.
Yes, it-
All in favor? It's unanimous.
New graphic?
Okay.
Okay, onto the policies. The first, you have two policies. If you take the document out of your packet with the colored markings on it, the first policy is the first page, policy JK, student discipline. The revisions in blue are the revisions that we had from our council, Paige Tobin, to ensure that we're in compliance with the new statutes. The revisions in yellow are those of your humble policy subcommittee who thought we might make a few additional revisions to these policies, which I think were last revised in either 1994 or 2004. I'm not sure which, as I sit here. Yeah, and those yellow highlights, which my policy committee playmate, Mary, and I went through on Monday night, those have been vetted by council, and she has confirmed and approved those changes as well. So that's policy JK, student discipline.
Questions?
Yeah.
So on the second page, under legal obligations, where it says with respect to removal of students, that's in blue, so that's on page, but then it's crossed out. Was it crossed out by page?
Correct, that's
Okay.
right.
And it's in somewhere else?
No, what, she took, the council took that out, I think, in response to the new legislation. And we, Mary and I thought it would be best to take out the reference to the statutes above that and refer generally to federal and state laws. So you'll see that down in the, you see that? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
So we can take these serially. We can take the first policy, JK, and if there's no, we can vote on that, and then we can go to JKF, which is on the second page. You
Let's
wanna
do that, yeah.
Okay. So I'd move approval of the policy, student discipline policy, JK, as revised.
Second.
Just the first page.
Oh, it's just the first page, okay.
On the motion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Yes. All right, the second one, beginning on the second page, disciplining students with special needs, policy JKF. Similarly, the changes you see in blue, whether they are crossed out or additions, were the initial changes from council. The changes in yellow are changes that the policy subcommittee made and that have been, approved by council. I do want to point out one thing on the second page of policy JKF. If you go to the second page, the second line down, where it starts, in order to ensure, you see that? If everyone could take their pens or pencils out and cross out that whole line, and cross out the line right after that. So that was the intended deletion, because it's duplicative of the new language above. And so that deletion was intended, and it didn't get into the draft that is in front of you now. And then beyond that, I'll just say generally, I think the view of the policy subcommittee with some of the deletions, some of the language, we try to keep it really focused on policy and charting the course, rather than coming out with broad proclamations. While our council appropriately doesn't seek to inject her opinion, she certainly wasn't opposed to that. So I guess I'd move approval of the revisions to policy JKF with the added revisions tonight that Linda Lee mentioned on program instead of plan, down under the, I guess it's now the first paragraph of the policy. So instead of individualized education plan, it will say individualized education program, and then delete the deletions that we spoke of on the second page. So I'd move approval of that policy as revised.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor? It's unanimous.
And then finally, I think the exciting news is that we have some more policies to look through with respect to physical education requirements. So these reports will continue. These reports will continue, and we'll continue to have the raucous good time that we have at our policy subcommittee meetings. Anyone who wants to attend, we post the meetings, and it's more fun than any human being should be allowed to have.
You might want to let us know when those meetings are.
Definitely.
Just posting them.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Moving on to old business, citizen speak topic response. We have none. Next meeting agenda items. I think we're good on that. No citizen.
Next meeting.
September,
20th.
August 20th is the retreat, but the next, 20th. The next regular meeting is September 3rd. And I will now entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussion, negotiating strategy for non-union personnel, the discussion of which in public session would be detrimental to our negotiating position.
So move.
Second.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.